Guys in the meeting should just react to me. I can't really hear anything, please.
We'll start by 15 minutes after 2. We are giving 5 minutes grace so that by 2:15, everybody will start.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, once again. I want to believe that please, as you log in, mute your mind. So mute your mic. Yesterday, by the time we finish today, we will not have much left from what we are supposed to do. You know, if we are meeting tomorrow, maybe to take 1 or 2 of your questions, then we'll conclude. But I'm believing, because there is a lot of repetition in some of the things you are going to do, how to select group leaders, how to meet influential groups, among other things. Some of those things, their steps and their procedures are the same. So once we're able to discuss one, once you get, you have your materials, you'll be able to run through other ones. Yesterday, please, at any point in time, you cannot hear what I'm saying, please draw my attention to it. You can raise your hand and I will observe you so that we make progress. Yesterday, we talked about strategies for community development. We talked about organizing, one of those strategies, organized credit groups to be able to have access to fund. We talk about revolving fund, where fund go around each member, maybe a fund from state government, federal government, or even a philanthropist that is interested in solving a particular problem. Then they provide the fund. A member of the group take the fund, take care of his or her business. After a given period of time, he brings back the fund, another person takes it. That is why it is called revolving fund. Then we talk about enterprise education, the need, to give people the skill, financial education, among other things, so that they can adequately monitor their or make effective use of their resources.
Please, sir, please, can I understand the topic, please? So let me follow up, please, because I wasn't around yesterday. I'm not with you yesterday, sir.
Who is speaking? Who is speaking?
It's Josephine is speaking. Akpara Josephine.
Akpara Josephine, if you are not in class, I'm doing a recap of what we did in the class yesterday. So learn how to raise your hand so that I will not be talking, you will be talking. You should learn the ethics that is involved in Zoom class. Raise your hand. I can't be talking and talking so that I will not hear people. Can you keep quiet and listen?
Okay, sir.
So I said yesterday we talked about strategies for community development, organizing credit groups, revolving fund, enterprise education, then viable economic activities that can provide income generating activities for people we are working with. We also talk about management of social work programs, where we talk about the need to create clear lines of communication among the different agencies we are working with. People taking responsibility, people picking roles of what they are going to do. So people will be responsible for something. So talk about the kind of line, people maintaining their boundary, the different institutions that provide services to people, maintain their boundaries so that the line of communication will be clear cut and people will understand what is happening so that we don't have what is called a confusion of purpose. We also talk about making services accessible to the public, talk about effective coordination. Then from there, we move to program evaluation, trying to make sure that whatever intervention we are providing from time to time, we try to evaluate to make sure that it is in tandem with the goals that we have set out to achieve. Are we making progress? Are we moving towards the set objective? If we are moving towards the set objective, you know we are doing fine. If not, we'll try to look at it again, do a kind of assessment, try to find out what went wrong. You understand? Then we'll talk about formative evaluation and summative evaluation. Those things were clearly spelled out yesterday. Then we'll talk about social work program design, where we say we need the key issues that we need to identify in program design. We'll talk about resources available to address the need. We'll talk about identifying the group we need to work with. Talk about what is involved in designing a strong and effective social work program, which is key to tasks, which we include navigating administrative and organizational hurdle. We talked a lot about some bureaucracies, some bottlenecks that prevent people from accessing services. How we will be able to break those bureaucracies? Things like filing, filling form. I talk about sometimes if you want to access a particular program or intervention, the processes will be so strenuous that you may decide to hell with the intervention, to hell with the services. How can we give human face to the services we provide to people so that it will be attractive to the end users, the consumers of social work services? Then we talked about raising awareness of program services, establishing logistic partnership. Logistics is very key. Building partnership between different agencies that provide services to the consumers of social work services. I was able to make the point yesterday that social work has gone multidisciplinary, that the consumers of social work services, the clients we serve, sometimes it is not enough for the social workers to provide all the services that is required. I gave a classical example using rape, for instance, where the medical personnel will be involved, the social worker will be involved in terms of providing psychosocial support, the police will be involved, the lawyer also will be involved. Then we talk about securing grants and funding to be able to execute the project we want to talk about, we want to engage in. We also talked about the importance of analyzing funds received, be transparent enough to be able to, spell out what the fund that has been given to you, how you were able to use it, your evaluation program, your monitoring program, so that somebody can look at your planning, look at your assessment, look at the intervention that you have engaged in, and be able to say, this person is moving towards this particular trajectory. Then we talk about measuring and maintaining accountability. From there, we move to social mapping and asset mapping. And I try to draw your attention to be careful not to confuse social mapping with asset mapping. And I explained that asset mapping is a subset of social mapping. So when you talk about social mapping, talk about the community structure, the things that are in the community, the various institutions, the family institution, the religious institution, the traditional institution, the women group, age grade, all of them, the hospitals, the railway, the streets. That is social mapping. And when you finish social mapping, if you give it to an individual that is in that community, the person will be able to give you, this is the direction of where my residence is. This is the direction where you can access a hospital. But when we talk about asset and need, we say that needs are the gap that exists that we need in the community. The asset on the other hand are the resources that are within the community. And I tried to make the point yesterday that the reason why we talk about assets in social work is that when we are working with a client, we work with client, not for client. So there is something the people we are working with are bringing to the table. They are called assets. So once you do asset mapping, what it means is that you are giving the people the impression that there is something they are contributing. And that is one of the ways we can do effective buy-in, make the people to buy in into the project or intervention that we want to introduce in the community. Once you get their buy-in, they will help in the sustainability of the project. They will call the project our project, not your project or government project or government intervention. So we'll talk about different types of asset mapping: personal asset mapping, associational mapping, and community asset mapping. So then we delved into how to develop a plan for assessing local needs and the resources. I think that was the last thing we talked about yesterday. We said that 2 questions are going to guide us. The first is why assess needs and resources? And we're able to explain them. That helps us to gain deeper understanding of the community. It also encourages community members to consider the community's assets and how to use them. Sometimes communities have assets, but they don't know that the assets will be of benefit to them. So when you assess needs and resources, they will now know that what they think will be solved by an outsider, that they even have the resources to be able to deal with it. Then the second question is, why develop a plan for the assessment? Why do you need to develop a plan for the assessment? I will make the point that it allows us to involve community members from the beginning of the process. When you develop a plan with them for the assessment, you get community members involved from the beginning of the process. So an assessment is a great opportunity to use community-based participatory research. Community-based participatory research is a research that is, make use of the community people. So we are not using an outsider to come and give a kind of armchair research. They say he who wears the shoe knows where it pinches. From there, we are now going to our main topic for today and some of the things we are going to handle for today. We are going to look at those who engage in developing a plan for assessing local needs and resources. Those who engages in developing a plan for assessing local needs and resources. My first question will be, and I want some responses, hoping that I may not be able to call names because the names I called yesterday, nobody responded. So don't want to catch anybody. Anybody that can hear me can just raise hand, mute the mic. Once you discover that another person is speaking, I'll give like 2 or 3 persons opportunity to speak. So I want to ask, if, for example, you want to develop an intervention for adolescent girls, who is the number 1 stakeholder that you are going to involve in developing that intervention? I repeat, if you want to develop an intervention for adolescent girls or teenage girls, I want to know, from your opinion, who is the number 1 stakeholder that you are going to involve in developing or planning for such intervention? We can do that in less than 1 or 2 minutes so that we'll make progress. Did you hear the question? Yes, Lucky. Let me hear from you, Lucky. Lucky, unmute and speak.
Good afternoon, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the question, the first person that should be engaged is the teenage girl herself.
The who?
The teenage girl herself.
The teenage girl herself. Okay, that
Yes,
is a
sir.
very good one. Yes. So, Blessing. Yeah, let me hear from you, Blessing.
If it's dealing with community, if it's a community development, I think the first person that we are supposed to engage would be the community chairman, or the person that is person with the most hand in the community.
Okay, that is a beautiful one too. I'm trying to, any other person, let's try to put things in their proper perspective. Big Daddy, is that your name? Joyce. Let me hear from you.
Sorry, I didn't really quite get the question. Can you please repeat?
Okay, the question is, if you are developing an intervention or planning an intervention for adolescent girls or teenage girls, who is the number one stakeholder we are going to involve?
Developing an intervention. I'm not quite sure of the answer, sir.
You are not quite sure. Lucky, do you want to say something again?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir. I believe is either the teenage girls as themselves or the parents of the girls, the parents or guardians of the girls.
Now, you have all answered well. Between Blessing and Lucky, let's make a little clarification. Before you begin to work with teenage girls, you must have done community entry. That is where Blessing got it right. Do you understand? When you must have done community entry. I'm not saying that Blessing is right. Listen to what I'm saying. You must have done community entry. Before you do community entry, you must meet with community leaders, because if not, you may not succeed in community entry. But when you must have done community entry, I want to develop intervention for adolescent girls or teenage girls. The number one stakeholder there is the teenage girls herself, because they are the ones that wears the shoe. They knows where it pinches. Blessing, does that point, did the point sink to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I see you raising your yeah. So I just needed to make that clarification. If it is so, anytime you are working as a social worker, you are working with a group, the number one stakeholder is the beneficiary of that services. The number one stakeholder we are going to work with is the beneficiary of that services, and that is the mistake many people make. They believe because they have gotten the women group, the community leaders, you understand that everything will say. You can work with them, no problem. They can tell you, we know the problem of the young girls. They are not, even their mothers who pass through that stage. The time they pass through that stage is no longer, they are now mothers, they are no longer teenage girls. So it is the teenage girls that understand the dynamics of the problem they are facing. And I always use the word, he who wears the shoes knows where it pinches. So the beneficiary, have it at the back of your mind. Any particular point in time, you are developing an intervention for a particular group of people with disability. If it is people that are abusing drugs, you want to plan, develop an intervention for them. They are the number one stakeholder. The beneficiaries of that services are the number one stakeholders that we are going to make use of. So when we want to engage in developing a plan for assessing local needs and resources, Joyce, you want to say something again? Okay, let me assume that it was the previous hands you raised that is still up. The number one, who should be involved are number one, those experiencing need that should be addressed. The number one people is those experiencing need that should be addressed. It is both fair and logical to involve those who are most directly affected by the adverse condition. I think I've made that point. They know best what effects those conditions have on their life. And including them in the planning process is more likely to produce a plan that actually speaks to their needs. So when you include them, when they are talking from the point of those who are bearing the burden of the problem. They are not doing guesswork. Every other person is doing guesswork. The people that are, experiencing that problem, they are talking from experience because he who wears the shoe knows where it pinches. Then the second group could be the health and human service provider, the social workers, the community health workers, the public health workers, every other, the people that are providing those services, the service providers. We are going to involve them because if it has the point of providing services, they are the ones that are going to provide services. So the service providers are very key. It could be the school setting. If, for example, you are working on a re-enrollment of children back to school, maybe a community has out-of-school children, I want to re-enroll them back to school. If you're not planning an intervention, you must get the primary schools, the schools involved in the planning process. If not, you cannot finish your work with the beneficiaries and now impose them to the school and say, take them, they are out of school children. Should be able to plan with them so that they know the resources are available, the facilities. Do they have enough facility where the number of children that wants to come in? Do they have the manpower to be able to train or to teach those children? You understand? All those things need to be put into consideration. That is why you need to involve the service providers. The government officials, the local government councillors, the House of Rep, House of Assembly members, engaging them in planning and carrying out helps to ensure that they will take the effort serious and work to make it successful. Sometimes there are problems that require policy formulation. That is why it is important to get government officials involved. So if it is something that, for example, we are talking about children hawking, and there is need to enact a law to prohibit it, it is the government official that has the power to legislate over it. That is why you need to get the elected people involved. So if it is something that will be solved through policy formulation, they will be able to handle it from that perspective. Then the fourth group is influential group. There are people that are in community. They may not be elected official. They may not hold any particular position. Some of them, they refer to them as opinion molders. They are influential in the community. By one reason or the other, the community listens to them. Anytime they speak with power, they speak with authority because the people trust them. This can include individuals who are identified as leaders because of their position. For example, if you have a principal, maybe the principal is another community, but he's an indigenous of the community you are working with. He's an opinion leader. Directors of hospital, other major organizations, because of the prestige of their profession, doctors, clergymen, pastors, the imams, the priests in the churches. These are influential people. They have a congregation that listens to them. So these people are influential people in the community. There are those who are even opinion leaders that may not even occupy any pronounced position in those communities. Then the fifth group of people you need to include are those whose job or life will be affected by the eventual action taken as a result of the assessment. They may include the teachers, the police, the emergency room personnel, landlords, and others who may have to react if new community policy or procedures are put in place. So if you introduce something new in the community, those whose businesses will be affected, they are part of the people you are going to engage, so that you should be able to navigate how they can navigate through the situation and come out, because we are not introducing an intervention to harm another group. You don't want to solve a particular problem to create a problem for another people. Then we have a community activist, businesses. Now, the next question is, when should needs and assets be identified? At what point in time in your intervention do you need to identify the needs and assets of the in the community? And the answer is, it is at all levels of your intervention. at all levels of your intervention, at the planning stage, at the implementation stage, at the evaluation, at any particular point in, as long as the lifespan of the intervention exists, the needs and assets of the community, of the people, should be identified. So identifying needs and assets can be helpful to your organization at almost any point in your initiative. Look at what they say. Almost any point in your initiative. If your group has a specific goal, such as reducing teen pregnancy, then identifying local needs, better communication between parents and teens, education programs, and resources, things like youth outreach, peer counselors related to the issue can help you, develop a workable, effective goal. So as you are carrying out your intervention, from planning to implementation, from planning to assess, from assessment to planning, planning to implementation to evaluation, as throughout the lifespan of your intervention, it is always important because that you identify the needs and the assets within that particular environment. In specific, look at frequency assessment of resources and need, period of planning the initiative. So the first, when you are planning the initiative, this gives coalition members, community leaders, and those being served an idea of how to improve their circumstances. During implementation of an initiative, that is the second period. By the time we finish listing all these things, you will discover that it is throughout the lifespan of your intervention that you continue to identify needs and you continue to identify resources to be able to deal with a particular challenge that or a particular group you want to work with. So during the implementation of an initiative is the second step, is the second place. It is important to make sure that you are on target, not only at the beginning and the end of a project, but also during its implementation. You understand? It is on an ongoing basis. You can't stop. Identifying needs and resources is an ongoing, it is a continuous process. So it's not something you say you have done, identified the needs and the resources, you close your chapter, you begin to implement an intervention. It's not done that way. As you are throughout the lifespan of your intervention, because it is an ongoing basis, because it is a continuous process, even during monitoring and evaluation, either ongoing or after the complete, even when you must have completed the project. And we say it is also important you celebrate success and to learn from setback to further community development. So why it is ongoing is that even when you finish the project, you may be able to identify some of the setbacks that you were able to experience during implementation of the project. It is also a learning point for you so that you see where you can make amendment so that you have a better result. Now, let us look at steps or process for social mapping. One of the first steps is that you need to consult with the local community to identify an appropriate time and place for the exercise. The first step for social mapping is that you need to consult with the local community to identify an appropriate time and place for the exercise. If you did not consult with them, you come and say you have come to do social mapping. Somebody will tell you, please, I'm on my way to the farm. The other person will tell you, I have a very business that I need to deal with. Another person will tell you, I have a sick mother that is in the hospital I need to go and take care of. But if you consult with the local community, you will be able to know an appropriate time. It's an agreement now. So everybody, you will be working towards the agreed time. They too will be working towards the agreed time. You will not give anybody an opportunity to give flimsy excuses. The second step is that you need to explain the purpose of the exercise to the participant. When you must have gathered to do the social mapping, you must explain the purpose of the exercise to the participants. Ask them to begin by drawing the main physical features of their locality. What are the major roads, the major streets, the major happening areas? Is it the village square? You understand? Is it the hospital? Is it a particular club where people play draft? You should be able to know, you begin to, once you explain the purpose of the exercise to the person, then begin to ask them by drawing the main physical features of their locality. Let them use whatever material they choose. They can begin to use some objects to begin to identify. For example, you can use something like cross or H to identify hospital. You can use something like C to identify church. You understand? You can use something like small hut to identify residential area. You can use dotted lines to identify a stream or a river within the community. Now, the third thing you need to do is to watch the process carefully and take detailed notes. Don't rush things. When you are developing social mapping with the community members, you don't need to rush. Watch the process carefully and take detailed notes. What is happening within the group members? Remember, you need to keep track record of who is actively involved. When you are working with a group, there are people who overshadow others. There are those who are very active. There are introverts. So you need to identify them and try to ask them one or two questions. Even when those who are vocal are speaking, should be able to say, it seems you have not said anything. Can you get your opinion of what has been said? Even if the person did not say anything, let the person agree with those who have said something. Or you try to make the person to make an explanation based on what others have said. Then the fifth step is that you need to know as a social worker that you are a facilitator. A facilitator facilitates. You lead the process. No, you facilitate the process. The people who lead, drive the process. What you do is to provide the environment where everybody can participate actively. So remember, you facilitate. Don't try to impose your idea on the people. Begin to ask them, why not do this one? Or why not, is this one not a better option? That is not your job. Your job is to facilitate. I intervene only when necessary. You know, sometimes you may discover that there is a kind of disagreement between the group members we are working with. You should be able to provide opportunity for the different conflicting views to express what they mean and help them to have a kind of a meeting point or an explanation that is acceptable to both conflicting views. It is also important not to disrupt the process. I think I'll make that point. Wait for a good time in the process if you must add or clarify anything. You know, there are people that facilitate a process. Once somebody says something, then the social worker will be the person that will explain what the person has in mind. Allow people to express themselves. You know, if they brought out a symbol, you can now ask a question. What is, you know, if when they brought out a symbol, they finished making their explanation. They did not explain what the symbol is. You can now ask, what does this symbol represent? Once they tell you what it represents, you can now connect it with the explanation they have made. Now, when they finish the mapping, you can now ask some people to identify their residents within the social mapping that has been drawn. You can now begin to ask people around, with what you have done with your social mapping, what is the way to your strength? People should be able to say that. If people looking at the map will not be able to say that, what it means is that the social mapping that was not is not properly done. You can now take a look at the map and clarify. Ask specific questions on parts that are unclear to you. You know, then copy the map made by the participant onto a large sheet of paper immediately with all the details. You know, so the essence is to make sure that you have a copy of the social map as it originates from the people. Now, you can now do what is called triangulation. When you want to do triangulation, there are people who participated in the social mapping. When you want to do triangulation, you can give it to another people who are in that community who did not participate, and you begin to ask them from the map.
Like read about. You have your phone. Read about.
Okay, so I'm trying to explain triangulation. So when you finish doing your social mapping, with a group of people, there are other people who may not participate in the social mapping. You can now take the social mapping that has been done to do triangulation to know whether it will reflect the opinion of people who are not around. If you're able to do that triangulation and you get that responses, then you are good to go. Now, community asset mapping. You remember we say that assets are resources within the community. We talk about individual assets, and we were able to establish yesterday that within any community or environment, that the biggest asset in that environment is the human person in that environment. That is the biggest asset. And I've made the point why many people are interested in Nigeria. It is because of the human assets in Nigeria. Nigerian population, over 200 million people, not even crude oil. You understand? It is the human asset. We talk about human asset, we talk about community asset, we also talk about associational or group assets. So it should be, when you are now identifying this asset, it could be natural resources. It could be the human person. I made reference, for example, if you want to build a project within a community, for example, hospital, you may have
Okay, hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Josephine, yes, what is your question?
Sir, please, you know that today is the first time I join you people. Please, sir, you said that...
Wait, can you keep quiet? If you are joining for the first time, that is not my business. Yeah, if you are joining for the first time, that is not my business. You don't...
Sorry,
I want to hear your question. What is your question?
Now, my question is, you said that in carry out mapping, so that you use this adolescent or intervention on adolescent oh God. Then you said that we should first of all tackle, see the stakeholder first is, it will be that person, that beneficiary that we should carry out, that we see first. Then after then to carry out the intervention, we have to start with identify the problem. Then after we identified it, then we carry out the plan. Then after the plan, then you said that, is it implementation that said that we should carry out again, so that I can follow us, please, so sir, don't be annoyed, though, since we are going to take an examination after.
Your question is incoherent. I don't know if anybody had your question, so that I know where, because from... Can you off your video? 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 Better Josephine. Okay, you are the one that is raised. I'm asking you to off your video. Then I want to know if there is anybody that was able to understand the question she's asking, so that we'll try to trash the question before we make progress. He was busy mobbing up a whole lot of things. But I remember that we tried to do a recap of what we did yesterday. And we started with those who engage, those we can engage in developing a plan for assessing local needs and resources. Then the first question I ask you guys is, if you want to develop an intervention for teenage girls, who is the first stakeholder you are going to engage in? And you get some response from Joyce, Lizzie, Blessing, and Lucky. You know, so Blessing was making reference to the community leaders, and I said the community leaders is not absolutely out of place, because you need to do community entry first. And for you to do successful community entry, you need to engage with the community leaders. But because the beneficiary of any particular intervention are the primary stakeholders that you need to involve. The reason is because they are the people that wear the shoes, so they know where it pinches them. Then from there, we now ask, at what point do we need to do needs and do we need to identify needs as an asset? If I understand what her question is trying to say, at what point do we need to identify the needs and assets? And we said, throughout the lifespan of your project, from the assessment to planning to implementation to at any part, as long as that project exists, prior to planning, during implementation, that it is an ongoing process. It is a continuous process. You cannot say you have identified need and resources, then you do your assessment. You do like when you now go to implementation, you see, since you have identified the resources and the needs, that you are not going to identify another resources or needs, that it is an ongoing process. Why is it an ongoing process? The consumers of social work services, which is human beings, are very dynamic. This happens in their environment. So given that dynamism, if things change, the social worker who is working with that kind of individual should be able to be dynamic enough. It is not when things change, you now say, my God has killed me. Oh. We need to know that the consumers of social work services are dynamic. Their environments are dynamic. So that is why the identifying needs and resources is an ongoing process. So if, for example, you identify a particular resource and you started planning with that, and during the time of implementation, there is another available resources that you need to use. Are you now saying that because the resources did not come during the planning, that you are not going to make use of it? That is why we say it is an ongoing process. So I think with this explanation, I've been able to try to bridge. The first thing I did was try to do a recap of what we did yesterday to brainstorm, bring us up to speed to what we did yesterday, and now moved into the topics we are discussing today. Now, we were able to talk about community asset mapping, and I was trying to explain that yesterday we talked about the different assets within the community, the individual asset, the group or association asset, and the community assets. And I was making the point that sometimes community people don't even know that they have assets. And I was trying to give an example that if you want to build a hospital, you may have the raw materials, or maybe the if, for example, the raw material is costing something like 5 million, what you may need is to source for that raw material. It is possible that there are those who are plumbers in that community who may provide what is called pro bono services. If they do that, they become a resource to the community. If you have carpenters who can work in that project and they can provide pro bono services, they are also resources. Or even when they need to be paid, if they can collect 50% of their payment, they have added something to such projects. If you look at the material you have, community asset mapping. We have the physical assets, we have association, things like social institution, the hospital, the educational institution, all these things are assets in the locality. We have the local economy, we have the natural resources, we have the individuals. All these things are the things you need to map out when you are doing asset mapping within the community. And we said that community asset mapping is identifying and recording the specific people, places, businesses, organizations, and interrelationship within a community that will help your project. I take it again. Community asset mapping is identifying and recording the specific people, places, businesses, organizations, and interrelationships within the community that will help you or that will help your project. It helps to identify valuable resources present in your community. It is not resources for resources' sake. It must be valuable. That resources must be of import to the project you are undergoing. So social workers, we need to obtain the permission of administrative and local village authority to begin discussion within the group. So when you want to, Josephine, do you have another question? You are still raising your hand.
No, sir. Thanks, sir. I have understood you, sir. Thanks, sir.
Okay, Omoja, can you please mute your mic? Omoja, can you mute your mic? So we are now going to look at the steps that you want to take when you want to do community asset mapping with a group. The first thing you need to do is to introduce yourself to the important village authorities, like village leader, the sub, if it is a mayor, if the person is a councillor, if the town union president. I think many communities make use of town union president. In some places, the traditional ruler is very influential and very powerful. In some places, could be the youth leader, depending on the dynamics of that community. So you need to introduce yourself to the important village authority. Step 2, explain the objective and strategies of your project by putting emphasis on community participation. If you are now introducing the objective and strategies of your project, if you are now laying emphasis on community participation, the importance of engaging in the community, then they will now see the rationale why it is important that you identify assets in the community. Because without identifying the assets in the community, we may not be able to have a successful project implementation. Step 3 is that you need to talk about communication strategies for social mobilization. How do you begin to mobilize people within the community? Communication strategy. Which strategies are you going to use? In some places, town criers are very effective. You wake up in the mornings. Once a town crier make an announcement that they needed so people in so village square by 7 a.m. or by 6 a.m., you see people trooping to that place, knowing that that's an important thing that is taking place. You know, is it the village leaders advise us? There are people that, if you meet them, they may not be the village leader, but they just be the people that the village community leaders listen to. If you're able to get their buy-in, what it means, you are able to penetrate, and they will help you do your mobilization. In some cases, religious leaders who first dominate the area may be very influential because they may have a large crowd of congregation or followership, that anything the person says at the pulpit becomes like a law that should be implemented. So we need to find out whether the religious leader in a particular environment is that influential for you to use to do your asset mapping. Now, you can now ask the village leaders permission to meet with community representative with whom to meet and discuss. Then you can propose a working and limited number of people who can offer different perspectives, including men, women, youths. When we are now trying to do this asset mapping, try to make sure that the different segregation of the community are represented. If you have the physically challenged, put them. If you have people with special needs, try to see. If we have women group, if you have youth organization, you have town union, make sure that all of them are represented. If you have adult male, if you have pensioners, get all of them in, make sure that they are represented. Don't just go and assume that this group will represent this group. I always make the point, he who wears the shoes knows where it pinches. You know, I've had the opportunity of doing what is called citizen report card in a particular community in Southeast Nigeria. So we needed to get information from the adult male, adult female, male youth, and female youth. So when we got to the community, they insisted that we cannot talk to the young girls, that they know, that in fact, it is the adult men that are saying that they know every problem that the female youth have. So they want to stampede us not to get information from the female youth. We are trying to find out why is there dropout of young girls in school. So the elderly men are telling us that we cannot go and ask the young, that they know their problem, that their problem is that they are wayward, that they know everything. So at a time, we now have to use the power we have, that if you want this intervention to benefit, we have a mandate to get information from the female youth. Except if you don't want us to continue this intervention with the community. It then means that we are going to go away to another community to carry out intervention if you did not allow us to have access to speak to the female youth so that they tell us why young girls drop out of school in that particular environment. It was at that point that they reluctantly allowed the female youth to speak to us. And when we are now asking them, they were telling us that the reason that they may be up to 30 that will enroll into JSS1, that before they get to SS3, like 27 or 25 must have dropped out of school. And we're asking them why. Say immediately they are in JS2. Their parents, both male and female, will be mounting pressure on them that they should get married. Do they want to stay in their father's house to grow old? So we now discover that these are the information that the elderly men want to hide from us. You understand? So that is why I say, when we are involved, the beneficiaries of a particular intervention need to be involved. They wear the shoe and they know where it pinches. Now, once you're able to get the right type of people you need to work with, the next thing is to set up a meeting with the community representative and representative of groups invited by your organization to complete part 2. Then after that, you record questions and responses before thanking the participants. Now, so these are basically the steps you need to do for you to be able to have effective asset mapping. Then based on the questionnaire you develop, you now begin to ask some specific question concerning the assets within the particular community or a particular locality. Now,
Sir,
I'm listening. I'm listening to somebody that wants to talk, please.
sir, I want to know that steps. I only copy 3 steps where you start. I don't know whether is there another one. Is it only 3 steps that we have in this?
Okay. Do you have a material for do you have the material?
I haven't. I haven't, sir. Please, can you send the material? Let me use it to read.
Please, can you give me 1 minute or 1 minute or 2 minutes? I'll come back. Let me deal with something. Okay. Josephine, one of the coordinators of this program is going to, I'll speak with the person so that they can post the material for this IPE program in the platform again. If you join a group newly, the first thing you do is to ask among your peers what and what has been done, so that we don't begin to do all this back and forth. I hope that is clear.
Yes, sir, it's clear, sir.
Okay. Then, how do you identify influential groups and their description and analysis of different village groups? This group, influential groups, how do you identify them? How can you describe them? And how can you analyze them within a locality? These groups are formal groups. Some of them could be informal. Some of them can be non-formal. The most important thing is that they are groups that gather regularly, regardless of the frequency of the meeting. If you are talking about formal groups, you are talking about groups that have laws, policies that guide members. If you are talking about informal groups, they may not necessarily, they just gather, they may not have laws, but they work towards the benefit of the locality or the community. So what are the steps in identifying, describing, and analyzing this group? The steps, like I said before, are very similar to the steps that we used before. That is why I say that from this session on, we'll be seeing some kind of repetition. And to identify and analyze a group, you need to explain to a group that you are going to use what is called a grid, whether it is formal. So the grid is going to help you. And in trying to use a grid, you should be able to draw a table. For example, if it is Hunters Association in your environment, or if it is women group, once you mention, the first thing there is the serial number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how many groups you have. You list all the groups in the community. The second column will give you their name. The third column will give you their goal or activity. The fourth column will give you the type of group. The fifth one will tell you the age group of members. This sixth one will give you the size of the group, the frequency of the meeting, connectivity, and their influence. Now, serial number 1 to 5, that one is not a problem. Group name is not a problem. Goal or activity, whichever group should be able to have a goal and activity they perform. The type of group, whether it is for male or whether it's for male or female, or whether it is mixed, should be able to be stated. Now, when you now begin to talk about age group of members, you can now begin to use symbols like X. If you're now using, for example, if it is XX, you can now say that XX represent, it is a group member for between the age of 18 to 25. If you are using XSX, you are now saying it is the age member of people between 50 years and above. So you don't need to say 50 years and above. You just have a kind of a key that represents X will tell you, XX will tell you, XSX will tell you. The size of group with the same thing. X can represent small size, that it is a small size group. XX will tell you that it is a mix. It is an average group. XSX can tell you that it is a large group. Then frequency of meeting, X can tell you it is they don't meet always. XX can tell you that they meet moderately. XSX can tell you that they meet frequently. Connectivity with community members. If you have X, it can tell you that they don't connect very well with community members. SX can tell you that they moderately connect with community members. XSX can now tell you that they connect very well with the community members. The same thing with influence. If it is X, they don't have much influence on the locality. If it is XX, they have moderately influence. If it is XSX, they have highly, they influence the locality very highly. The reason why you need to do this thing is that when you are now getting your information, you don't need to explain some of these things. It is you that have the key. So once you put X, it will tell you this is what X represents. This is what XX represents. This is what XSS represents. So with that, you can now go home and begin to look at the presentation of the grid that is before you. You will be able to identify, is it the women group that meet frequently? Is it the women group that have much influence in the community? Is it the hunters group? Or is it the youth group? Do you understand? So that is what is important in trying to identify influential group. You make use of, so anytime you want to identify influential groups or to describe an influential group in a community, you make use of a grid to be able to describe and compare the listed group. Then should be able to write the different groups the way from top down a row to the last row, and now begin to assign values to them based on what you have defined to become the value. In your material, these things are there. So when you are looking at those diagrams, from this explanation that I've made, it will begin to make sense to you. Now, with the group that you have formed, that have given you information on how to identify or describe a particular influential group in the community, once you finish doing what you are doing, it is always important that you thank everyone that have participated in trying to help you to identify influential groups within that particular community. Now, another thing we need to look at is to understand community social dynamics and socially influential person via mapping. The same process that we use in identifying influential groups are also going to help you to understand socially influential person via mapping. It will also help you to understand the community social dynamics. The dynamics in community has to do with the power structure in that community. Who controls what? Who controls the political environment of that locality? Who controls the religious life of that community? The finances, the economy of that community, in whose hand it is? Which area of the community is more civilized? You sometimes go to some locality, some behave more civilized than others. Some are more educated than others. You understand? All these things will help you to understand the dynamics, such that if you go to a particular village that is highly educated, your approach may be different from villages where they don't have highly literate people. Now, there are some questions that will help you to understand community social dynamics and socially influential persons. If, for example, you are working with women group or men group, you can ask them, which people, men, women, elders, religious leaders, etc., can influence through their words and their action community members' thoughts and discussion about the well-being of a family. They should be able to tell you, because they know the community very well. They will tell you who will give you so information about a particular person that is very influential in a particular area. For example, you can now say, if somebody is seeking admission, who do you think have that influence that will be able to guide you so that a particular child will get admission in the university or in the tertiary institution? You also ask them, who are the people whose words and action influence the way people discuss? Those who form opinion. There are people who form opinion. They are very influential. They understand the community dynamics that, or the emotion of the community, that anytime they want to speak, their speech has a way of, appealing to the emotions of the community members. Should be able to know the people who are influential in that aspect. They may not be very rich, but anytime it's come to political decision, once that person is by your side, he'll be able to help you to mobilize and speak to the people. Group selection. How do you select a group? Remember, we have said that you make use of grid, which is the keys you assign to the grid. You should be able to know which group is more influential, which group have much impact on community life than the other. Which group can you work with? So the step one is identify most influential group. With the help of your grid, or with the help of the selection grid, separate the most influential group with the 3X. Among those groups, select the best connected. Any group that is best connected with the people is a very influential group. The second step that will guide you in selecting a group that is influential is a group that meets very frequently. If a group meets very frequently, what it means is that if there is any problem to be discussed, they will be able to discuss that problem when that problem is fresh. And if there is an intervention that is developed, the harm or the damage will not be much. But if you select a group that doesn't meet very frequently, what it means is that by the time they will meet to discuss about the problem you are trying to bring, the damage has been done. So from identifying most influential group, the group that is most connected with the people, and the groups that meets very frequently, you can now make your final selection to say, yes, these are the most influential groups within a particular locality. It is always very advisable when you want to select influential groups to look at those who are highly connected with 3X. But if you are unable to get that, you can now begin to consider those with 2X. But it's always advisable. Triple X always suggests that the group is highly connected with the people. They meet frequently. What it means is that if you are working with that kind of group, you will be proactive enough to be able to deal with whatever challenge that may come out in that particular locality. So after you must have finished identifying the group, the next thing you need to do is to meet with the group leader, or what is called the contact person. It could be the president of each of the selected group, in order to explain to him the purpose of the project and their expectation relating to the group. Then at the end of this discussion, set a time to meet with the members of the group. So your initial contact may not be after identifying the groups you need to work with. You need to meet with the leadership of the group. The secretary may be very influential, that once you meet the secretary, you can penetrate the president. So you can now have that executive meeting with them. Then after introducing your project to them, they can now provide a platform where you can now speak to members of the group. They can now tell you, we're having our general meeting next week. You can now come and discuss to us. You have our backing. Once they get that buy-in, you can now go and meet the group. Then after the initial introduction, the next thing you need to do is to discussion with the members of the group, because the group leaders must have paved way for you to be able to meet with the group member. And when you meet the group member, at any particular point in time, you are meeting people, You have that responsibility of introducing yourself and talking about the project, the objective, the expectation. Don't say that you have said it before, that there is no need of saying it. So you cannot say because you have told the leadership of the group the objective of the program or the goal of the project, that when you are now meeting the larger population, you are not going to also talk about the objective and the goal of the project. So from that, you can now begin to ask the group members to comment on the group activities, the objective. They will now tell you their own objective, their own activities, the things they do. You now see, as somebody that is working in that particular locality, what you can do to be able to, fit into their activity, or how you can use their activity to sell what you are doing. So that community members will know that, yes, this person that has come has pressed the right button, and because the right button has been pressed, definitely you are going to get the community buy-in. The people are going to key into the project that you have come to introduce into the community. So you need to find out from the group members whether their activity improve health of mothers and their children in your community. If yes, what kind of activities? You now look at it. Where does your own intervention, your own project comes in working with the group activities? You need to find out whether, if it is a group, an intervention that has to do with health, does the group member have a health worker that will be providing expert advice to the locality? The person that can speak the language the community people understand. Who are the members of the group who have the capacity to mobilize other group members and the community at large on this subject? Then who are the people whose words and action can positively influence the way which people discuss better, depending on the project? Make sure that once you select that group, the group you are selecting has a way of speaking to the intervention or the project you have come to execute or to carry out in that particular community. The next thing you now need to do is to determine relationship to other groups. You have selected a group you are working with. That group serves like your pivotal group or a pilot group you are working with. You also need to work with other groups that are within the community. So you now begin to determine relationship to other groups. Construct a kind of Venn diagram to establish relationship between groups. Ask participants to cite the group, association, institution within whom they have relationship with, the group they can work with. For example, the youth group can work with women organization. The youth group can work with town union association. You understand? The group youth can work with traditional institution. So once you get that influential group, through the use of Venn diagram, they'll be able to tell you that these are the groups that will have relationship with, and these are the groups that will also be very beneficial in making sure that the project that you have come to execute succeed. From that, you can now draw a very large flip chart on the ground and use a small circle in the middle of the larger one to represent the group that is present. Then, if there is information exchange between the group, then have them, try to see what is called cross-fertilization of ideas. Cross-fertilization of ideas help different groups that are present to begin to share knowledge, begin to share experiences. Sometimes group may be doing their own thing. Another group may be doing their own thing. Another group may be doing their own thing. But there may be a missing link between what all the groups are doing. It is the responsibility of the social worker within that group to be able to see how they can form synergy to make sure that they become more productive, or to make sure that the services that they are providing becomes more very efficient. So basically, these are the things we are looking at from the perspective of this very particular course, which is social work programming. So because there is, I think we have exhausted all we need to do on this material. So I will make sure that Mr. Mbina tried to, social worker Mbina repost some of this material so that some of you who don't have access to the material will have access to the material. Then by tomorrow, we'll now do a major recap, try to look at the entire course again, starting from the definition of what we did to what we are able to conclude today. It's going to be in summary form, in the summary format, so that we'll be able to carry along those who are joining the class for the first time. So let me pause. If anybody has a question to ask before we conclude. Are we here? Any question, any clarification?
Since there will be materials, sir, I'm okay. If there is material, I will use material to understand both those I am in present and those that I wasn't. Thank you, sir.
Any other person? Remember, if you have the material, please, there are some applied questions that will come out in your this thing. This is going to be computer-based, so it's going to be objective. You need to read in between the materials for the materials you have. Then there are some general basic things that I will require you to know. Things like the consumers of social work services, some of the roles that social workers play, the roles of enabler, broker, advocacy, facilitator, and the rest, the principles of social work. These are some general, basic, fundamental social work knowledge. The ethical principle in social work, ethics, values, principles, and the rest. So you should be able to have general knowledge about some of these things, verbal and non-verbal communication and the rest. So that while you are doing this, that there are general things we expect you to know about social work. If I now ask you who is the consumers of social work services, I don't expect you to begin to say, it is not in the material that was given to us. Or when I ask you, which problem did social work come to address? Generally, it is problem of inequality and the problem of poverty. You may not see it in this material. Throughout the program, you may not even see it in any of the materials where you are having. So you need to have that general understanding of what social work is all about. The definition of social work, among other issues. Who is a social worker? The difference between philanthropy. Many people confuse philanthropy with professional social work practice. Before you have that name, a social worker, you must have undergone the training. You must have acquired the skill, the knowledge, techniques required to practice social work, and you must be licensed to practice social work, among other issues. So these are some of the issues that you need to look at. So in the absence of any other question, I think we can call the class. We can bring the class to an end, while I think we have another class so that you prepare for the next class. Thank you very much, and do have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Please, can I get the material today? Can I get the material today so that I can prepare for it, please, sir?